Good morning, Making Moves community. We're back on another episode of the Tim and Tim Show, Tuesdays at 10 every week. Tim, how you doing today, man?
Always great.
Oh,
Always
I
great.
see you downgraded just to vest now, huh?
Yeah. I mean, that's what people are calling us anyway, right? So,
Yeah, we
although
totally just
although
went by last
although I
name.
saw a new one the other day, Tim VI
Oh, I did.
is
Yeah, that was
yeah,
a shout out to Nick on that one, huh? Tim
yeah,
VI. Um,
yeah,
Interesting. Cool. Well, hey guys. So it's the beginning of the year. I know that there's a ton of people that are either getting into real estate or getting into commercial real estate or buying apartments, or they're just trying to learn to educate themselves more. And the number one question that Tim and I get in our coaching and mentorship group is, how do we pick our markets? And there's so much information out there. There's so much information out there about how to pick good markets, how to pick emerging markets, how to pick markets to know when to sell, when to buy. There's also value in knowing population migration routes and density and job growth. I mean, there's so many different metrics to pay attention to. And when Tim and I were first starting out, we had the same questions ourselves and we did a lot of research, and we're going to talk a little bit today about our story and our journey of where we started and how we started to pick our markets, how far out we started to go to look at markets because we didn't think that we could find any deals. And we're just going to run with it, right? We're just going to talk about our experiences because it's relevant to people. Portugal's a great market. It's relevant to people that are either getting started or they felt like they've outgrown their smaller market and they want to grow into a bigger market or whatever. So, Tim, you're like the master here on picking different markets. Yeah. I mean, I know you're great at building relationships with those guys and picking good markets. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things that are your first criteria on. Well, let's start with local versus long distance, right? To make it a little bit easier. What made you decide to go either local or long distance, and why?
yeah. So, guys, when I started, I was just so you know, I was looking all over, everywhere. Everywhere in the United States was open for business as far as I was concerned. And what I ultimately found out after 6 or 7 months is I knew nothing about places where I had not spent significant amount of time. I've traveled all over, but spending 3 or 4 days or even a week somewhere doesn't mean you know that area, especially when it comes to investing in it. Um, so after a while, I started to pinpoint my markets. So for me, it came down to two things, what I wanted to do as a GP, as an owner, and where I could provide value. And for me, that meant more boots on the ground type activities, traveling to properties, seeing properties in person. Um, and I knew I wanted to do some volume. So um, when I started to look at markets and start to dial in to places that I knew, I kind of put a pin in a map and said, I'm going to go in a 4 hour circle around where I live. So that hit Eastern Tennessee, Southern Virginia, all of North Carolina, all of South Carolina, down into Georgia. Basically, I get me down into Atlanta, um, and that's the area I focused on with a high concentration on the Carolinas. Um, and over time, that's proven to be pretty profitable for me and for my partners. Um, and fortunately for us, the Carolinas is, you just heard Vitaly mention it. The Carolinas is one of those places where we have a strong net in migration occurring. Right, there's a ton of people moving this way, and then if you look within the Carolinas, people tend to stay here. They may move around, but they stay. For example, if you look at Charlotte, North Carolina, the the largest majority of people who leave Charlotte go to Charleston, South Carolina. So people don't leave Charlotte and move to California for the most part. They leave Charlotte and go to the beach and Charleston. Another big, yeah. Well, I was actually getting ready to say that's where I was going. They actually moved to Wilmington. Um, that's another area as well. So that's kind of how I pinpointed in on where I've been investing, which is the Carolinas. And just as an aside, I just had this conversation with somebody on Friday. It's very easy to get nailed down into markets where people are doing really, really, really well, like things in the Midwest, or a really good example is Memphis, Tennessee. And there's a reason people in Memphis, Tennessee do really, really well. That market struggled for a long, long time. Memphis had one of the highest crime rates in the entire country, 20 years ago, and for a while was leading the country in murders, I believe. But it has started to improve. It is still improving, but here's the thing about Memphis, at least as far as what I found, you better know it. You better know it on a street by street level, because just because somebody bought something right across the street from something you're looking at doesn't mean that yours is going to do well for the first couple of years, because you may be in the war zone, but right across the street may be just fine. And that's how Memphis is right now, or at least that's how it was a couple of years ago when I was kind of nailing down my markets. So that's kind of how I landed on where I do most of my investing. And part of that too was that I didn't want to fly somewhere to check out properties. I didn't want to be on a plane constantly. I wanted to be able to hop in my car. I wanted to be able to draw a line on, hey, here's 6 properties between here in Greenville, South Carolina, that I'm going to go drive today. And I'm going to get out of my car and physically walk around the property. And Vitaly and I have done that a number of times. I mean, what was it, like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, man? We hopped in the car one day, drove down to Greenville and Anderson, and looked at a couple of properties around there.
Yeah, that's when
And
I kindly invited myself. It's like, cool, I'm going to come with you.
hey, sure, yeah, I got a passenger seat. Let's go. So that's the kind of thing I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to be able to just hop in my car and go. And that's what's worked for me, guys. And again, it kind of came back to what I thought I could bring to a team. I knew I was going to be part of a team. What could I bring to a team? Well, for me, my biggest value right now is boots on the ground, driving properties, making those connections in those markets with brokers, and being able to do that face to face has just been really invaluable for me.
Absolutely. All really, really great points. And I want to expand on it a little bit further with the pros and cons, really. And some of the things that I've found through my investing career so far has been when I started looking at properties far away, like Tim had mentioning, everywhere. I wanted to look at everything everywhere because I didn't want to miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
But the catch 22 is if you don't know that market and you don't understand that market, you're never going to be able to identify a good deal anyways, right? It could be slapping you in the face, but you don't know it's a good deal because you really don't know the area, you don't know the markets. And I'm not saying that you can't invest long distance. I mean, we've partnered with people that live in Alaska and California. So investing long distance is totally feasible, but you have to look at yourself and understand, hey, what is the thing that I enjoy doing and that I can help other people with? And one of Tim's greatest assets is that he's lived in the Carolinas his whole life. Nobody knows the Carolina. I mean, I'm sure there are other people, but nobody in my life knows the Carolinas better than Tim Vest. So if we're looking at a property in Raleigh, he lived in Raleigh for 10 years or something like that. So of course I'm going to talk to him about, hey, what was your experience when you lived there? What were these areas? You're far more comfortable with it than I ever will be. But having that kind of relationship enables other people that are trying to invest long distance. It gives them the comfort to partner with you because you know it, right?
Yeah.
We bought a property in Mobile, Alabama. And honestly, that property is probably the one that gives us the most struggle. And it's difficult to get to. And it's kind of like the redheaded stepchild now. And it gets the same attention and everything else. It's just the property that takes more work and more effort because it's not in our normal realm. And what we learned from that transaction was, yeah, you could buy deals everywhere, but buying deals that really fit your long-term vision of what you want to do and where you want to be. And like Tim's thing was, he didn't want to get in a car and fly. Well, Mobile, Alabama, we have to get into a plane and fly. And it's the most ridiculous thing because it's, you got to plan it. You got to, there's a connection air flight. You got to book a hotel. You got to do this and that and the other thing. It's a lot of stress to do that. And it doesn't seem like it's a mounting stress thing. It's not like, something catastrophic in your life, but it's something that you have to think about and you have to plan about, and it doesn't become easy. And when things are not easy, they get pushed down the priority list, if you would, because you're going to take care of the things that are easier first.
Yep. Yeah. And hey, that really good points, Tim. And then I just want to kind of call out what Michael's saying here. I don't disagree with Michael. And what I would say is in our first 2 years, we didn't buy anything in a major inside of major metro city limits, if you will. So nothing in Charlotte, nothing in Raleigh. Especially because coming out of COVID, those areas just they exploded, absolutely exploded. So you're
Yeah, we
right.
looked at like the secondary markets around the major
Right.
metros.
Yeah. So like for instance, Raleigh, North Carolina, we started looking in places like Hillsborough, North Carolina, just outside in Mebane and Graham. You could go look in Pittsboro. You could look in Carborough. Those areas and around, like Charleston, South Carolina. That place is a hot. It's hot, really, really hot. And so we came back about 20 or 30 miles inland, and one of the first places that we purchased in that area was in Somerville, South Carolina, which has exploded.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of hit it right. Now, we'd love to take credit for some crazy analysis that we did on that market, other than just knowing, hey, you can't go any further east in Charleston, so people got to come back west. And oh yeah, look at all these buildings they're building out here on the highway. Um, so Somerville's made some sense. So I agree with you. Investing in major metro areas is very difficult. So start to look, 20, 30, 40, even an hour away from that metro area. Look in between. For instance, in North Carolina, between Charlotte and Raleigh, down 85, there's a ton of opportunity down through that corridor. In fact, I would say even from Charlotte to Atlanta, they call it the Charlanta corridor. There's a ton of opportunity and growth going down through that corridor. So you don't need to be in the metro area. There's a ton of opportunity just outside those metro areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, there's a lot of pros and cons investing locally or investing long distance. We've learned some lessons and I know, Tim owns a property up in Virginia. Uh, and, we own something as far south as Mobile, Alabama. But over the last 2 years, what we've really done is really narrow down and focus on exactly what markets we're going to buy in. And right now we have a property basically in every major metro except for the Greenville area,
Mhm.
um, in the Carolinas. And what we're learning is, yeah, we could buy property everywhere, and we've kind of gotten a taste of everything. But what we've really started to do is niche down on just two markets within. And it kind of seems a little, now that I'm saying it out loud, it kind of seems a little intuitive, because it's like we're looking far away, and then we looked locally, and then we bought stuff locally, but then we spread out all over locally. Now we're going back into a very tight niche area locally. And what we tell everybody else that's trying to get started is just pick one market, pick one place, set some criteria or some parameters where you're going to be looking within an hour outside of a major metro. Learn those markets, go drive those markets, walk the streets, understand exactly what you're looking at, what the people are thinking, what the broker's activity is in the area, what the insurance rates are in that area, what property management connections you can make, what kind of debt you can get. Because, like, if you get too far out, banks are a little less willing to give you a loan on properties that are, on the borderline of a tertiary market. So you got to know those thresholds. And the only way to do it is to be in it. And if you're investing long distance, get in a plane and go spend a week or 2 weeks or multiple times at a time. Oh, geez, what is this?
Ha.
Multiple, trips or whatever, in order to get to, understand the market, right? Like, you got to go build the relationships with people. Geez, can we delete this stuff?
Yeah, I blocked it.
Oh, we blocked it. Oh, there we go. It's cool. All right. Yeah. So obviously pros and cons. And, one of the things I want to talk about is a pro from being an operator where people are investing with you. Because I think this might be a little overlooked, but this is a benefit that it has been repeated to me more than once. And ultimately, people that want to invest passively into your deals, they also want to invest in good markets because they may or may not live in a good market, right? So I have investors that are all spread throughout the whole country, right? And they want to get a piece of the growth in the Carolinas. And part of like the pitch, or part of like the introduction of like why it would be a good idea for them to invest with me in the Carolinas is because I'm a local guy. Like, I lived in the Carolinas now for the better part of 12 years. And I consider myself, a local here. And one of the things that gives comfort to an investor is that one of the main sponsors, like as Tim and I, we sponsor the deals together, we sign the debt together. We say one of two or both of the main sponsors live in the Carolinas, and either one of them can be at the property within 2 hours. We don't necessarily invest directly in Charlotte, which we do have some stuff in Charlotte, or directly in Wilmington alone, but I can be in Raleigh in 2 hours, and Tim can be in Raleigh in 2 hours, and I can be in Charleston in 2.5 hours, and I can be in Columbia in 3 hours, right? And Tim can be there in an hour and a half. So we have the states pretty well covered, where if anything goes catastrophically wrong, one of us can be there at a moment's notice. Like I can drop everything and be there in a couple of hours, just get in my truck and go. And that gives a level of comfort to somebody that is investing long distance saying, hey, if I can't be there, I built this relationship with Tim and I trust them and they can be there for me. And this achieves my goals of investing passively. And I think it's a little bit of an overlooked thing, an overlooked benefit of being able to invest in your local markets and bring value to other partners that are trying to invest long distance and also other investors that are trying to invest long distance.
Yeah, really well said. Really well said. In fact, I had a nice meeting on Friday with a potential investor, and that was one of the biggest things, right? Like, what's your team look like, and how well do you know your markets, and how quickly can your team be there? And one of the things that really gave them some comfort and some confidence in our team was the fact that we're within a few hours drive of everything that we own and all the markets where we try to buy. Or we at least have extended team members that are even closer. Because we have some properties that are right on that 4 hour border. But those have team members that are even closer than us. So we and Tim and I had a conversation about this right yesterday, right? Like we're looking at how to increase our team, expand our team and stuff. And one of the biggest things that we talked about was, hey, we want to make sure people are there. We want to make sure people can go there on a regular basis. So we're typically looking for team members within those areas that can expand our boots on the ground capabilities, if you will. But Tim, I think you hit on a really good thing, a really big thing. I do recommend people pick a market and focus on it. I know we kind of were all over the place for a little while there, but one of the things we did do is we did drive down into an area, right? Like you can kind of define a market however you want, right? We could call Charlotte a market, we could call the Carolinas a market, the Southeast a market, whatever. Just kind of depends on your level of knowledge. But we did kind of drive down to an area, right? That 4 hour window where we could drive to. And there are some differences within that 4 hour radius. But at the same time, it's not me trying or you trying to figure out Memphis. It's not us trying to figure out the Midwest or anything like that. And guys, don't get me wrong, I'm invested in the Midwest. There's incredible cash flow opportunities in the Midwest that I want to take advantage of. But
talk about that a little bit more, right? Because that kind of ties into exactly what I was saying. Like, who are the people that you invested with in the Midwest?
Yeah, so I invested with people who have expertise in the Midwest. I am not a GP on properties in the Midwest. I've invested with those guys. I leave it to the guys who know those markets, who have boots on the ground in those markets. I'm invested in Texas. But the operators that I invest with there, they've been highly focused on Oklahoma and Texas for 10 years now. And that's where I've put some of my investment money, mostly to diversify, right? Like I'm heavily involved in the Southeast. I put some of my capital in other markets, because when one's down, another might be up. But I don't know that much about the Midwest. I don't know that much about Texas and Oklahoma personally. So I'm not strongly confident in being an operator there. So that's an opportunity to go leverage somebody else's expertise in a different market while I focus on my own.
Yeah, and for some guys that are trying to get started or trying to build a reputation for themselves, I know that this gets tossed around a lot, right? So don't shoot me here, but That's one of the ways that you can provide a lot of value to somebody that is trying to invest in your market, is to build a relationship with somebody that's already established, that has already expressed that they're trying to learn how to invest in your area, or they're looking to expand into your area, and reach out to them and build a relationship with them. Say, hey, like, I've lived in Austin, Texas for 20 years. Send me any deal you have in Austin, Texas. I'll go drive it for you. I'll let you know what I think about the area. I lived here for 20 years. I know where the path of progress is. Let me help you out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value there. And it's I'm not asking you to give me anything. I'm literally, look at the way that it's said is, let me do this for you. Let me provide value to you. I'm not asking for anything in return, but by doing so, you're going to inevitably build a relationship with that person. And you might not get in on the first deal or even the second deal, but you're going to be rubbing elbows with all the right people. And I can guarantee you that rubbing elbows with the right people is going to get you where you want to go faster than learning how to try to do it on yourself and saying, hey, I want 10% of the deal just because I'm boots on the ground and I know the market. Like, no, that's just not how it works. Right. But you got to
Right.
sacrifice, the very first deal that I ever did, I had like, a very small percentage of interest in the deal. Right. But that got my momentum going. That got me started. And that is important because I brought something to the table that they didn't have or that they needed. Right. And it was built through a relationship over a long period of time. You can do the same thing depending on where you live and depending on the people that are trying to invest in your markets. And
Yeah.
don't undershoot the value of being boots on the ground. And I know that literally anybody can be boots on the ground, but the person that provides value and takes initiative to reach out and say, hey, let me help you with this, I'm not asking for anything in return, is going to be the first person that the law of reciprocity comes back and pays.
Yeah, and Tim, really good point, and I think that expands as well that thought on the fact that hey, when you get something in a market, it's funny how people talk about deal momentum. It's funny how the next deal in that market comes faster and easier,
Mm-hmm.
because people like when we were first starting out, we would try to get into a market, and inevitably, a seasoned owner would look at us and go, "What do you guys own here? What do you own here?" And when you say nothing, they're, do you really know this market? Are you really a closer? That kind of thing. But when you own something in that market and you're able to tell them, yeah, I own right over here, they know, they're more likely to work with you because they know the market, they know you're a closer. And next thing you know, they start reaching out to you going, hey, I see you own here. I got something if you're interested in looking at it. That happened to me last Friday. Went to look at something. It turned out not to be anything. It turned out to be a complete sham, if I'm being honest with you. But I was able to talk directly with the owner of this property. And eventually towards the end of the conversation, he asked me, do you own in Charlotte? I was like, yeah, I own over here, and I'm purchasing something over here. And that immediately opened up the door. He's like, well, keep me in mind because guy's owned stuff in Charlotte for 40 years. He has quite the collection around the city. And, he's like, keep me in mind. I'm looking at exiting some things before too long. And, I'd like to chat with you. So people talk about deal momentum, and it's a very broad term, but it is very, very real term. And there's specific reasons for that, including, once you show that you're a closer and that you know a market, you own in a market, people are more likely to do business with you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now that we've talked about the pros and cons of local versus long distance investing, we want to talk about the other question that is kind of like they go hand in hand is, well, how do you pick your market, right? What are some things that you're paying attention to? And I just pulled this book off my shelf because I recommend this book all the time to people that are asking me that question, because sure, I could give you all the answers and tell you how to do it, but the faster that you learn and on your own and learn how to identify a good market versus a bad market, what is that going to do? It's going to give you confidence in your decision, right? Instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to pick this market because Tim told me to. No, I'm going to pick this market because I had read this book and I understand what a good market is. And I talked to Tim about it, or I talked to anybody in my sphere of influence about it, and I had a discussion about all of these metrics, and they all are in agreement that, hey, actually, I didn't look into this, but that could be a really good market, right? That's going to give you the confidence that you did your research, that you know what you're looking at, that you know what you're talking about. And there's no shortcuts here, right? I mean, investors are going to ask you why you're picking this market. Brokers are going to ask you why you're picking this market. Lenders are going to ask you why you're picking this market. Partners are going to ask you why they're picking this. Can I keep going? Like
Yeah.
literally everyone is going to ask you, why are you picking that market? And the best book to read to figure out why you should look into that specific market, not just because everyone else is doing it, is read this book, Merging Real Estate Markets by David Lindell. I recommend it all the time. His other book is up there on the shelf for me, David Lindell, Multifamily Millions, the blue one. That's the other catalyst book for me that got me started into the commercial real estate world. But in this book, he talks about how there's different market phases. You have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Phase 1 and phase 2 are buyers markets 1 and 2, and then there's sellers markets 1 and 2. And I don't remember the order of them right off the top of my head. You can read the book and find out. But it talks about how, there's a different, everyone knows that real estate is cyclical. It's either, a long period of decline. There's no jobs moving there, population decline. There's no new building. There's no net migration inwards. Everybody seems to be moving out. It's really going to be hard pressed to get some appreciation or forced appreciation or anything like that along in those markets. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that if you know that market really, 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 really well, then you could do well in that market still. But the general consensus of a market is going to be dictated by its phase of whether it's in a growth phase or a decline phase. And what makes the difference between in his book, he talks about how markets can be in these phases for decades. They can be in growth stages for decades, or they can be in decline stages for decades. And it's important to look at what changes those things in order to be able to identify those key market changers, right? Of what is going to essentially turn this market around. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, the three easy ones to pay attention are population growth, job growth, and wage growth.
Yeah.
Right. If you have those three things, you're probably doing okay. Right. But there's way more science behind it. And I highly recommend you read that book so you can really learn about what's, moving the needle behind the fact.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's a kind of a high level way, really, to kind of start to identify markets like job, wage, and population growth, right? And then you get inside those markets, and like something else that you can start to look at is they call them the big three, right?
Mm.
It's education, medical, and government, right? Like if you
Oh.
find a city that has education is the center of the government and has medical as well, that tends to be a pretty hot market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Raleigh,
because yeah,
Columbia,
Raleigh,
Atlanta.
yeah, and a big reason for that is those are all very, very stable, tend to be very stable markets, or stable job categories. So those are some high level ways to like dive into and identify a market. And you typically won't go wrong with those. Obviously, you can get into even more granular, a more granular level with the obviously the things that are outlined in that book. One of the other things I would call out too, because you mentioned like the cycle, right? Guys, like you've probably seen it in the news, right? They keep talking, the news and all these articles keep talking about the real estate market like it's one thing,
The
right?
crash. Oh, the
Right.
crash.
And there is, right? Like you look at like go back to 2008 and 2009, right? The overall real estate market crashed. Even at that time, though, within the real estate, there were submarkets. There were markets within the overall US real estate market that did just fine, even in 2008 and 9. And that's what you're going to see right now. I mean, this is not going to be 2008 9, but that's what you're seeing right now too. Like don't think of the real estate market as this one big thing. Because even right now, as some markets are going down, others are going up. And just be aware of that, and kind of honestly kind of tune out some of the noise, if you will. Be aware of what's going on with the overall market, but really understanding your kind of sub markets is huge. It's key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, knowing a submarket outside of a major metro is going to decide whether or not you're going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
In that market, not in general, but in that market, because sure, you might have all this like an easy one is to think about like Manhattan during COVID. Manhattan was crashing, renters were moving out, there was no movement on anything. But what was happening? Literally the whole surrounding area of the tri-state, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York those surrounding markets were exploding because
Yeah.
millions of people were leaving Manhattan, right?
Right.
So even though COVID made things slow down a little bit for the first couple of months, right after that there was this explosion of growth, right? And it's like if you think about, it's a very micro thing. It's not a macro thing. It's a micro thing depending on your market. So actually, it kind of makes me. I want to answer this question. What Michael Santiago is saying is, do you think it's better to invest in red states compared to blue states? And I'm going to tell you what you don't want to hear. I'm going to tell you that it's best for you to invest where you have the best systems and processes and competitive advantage. People still live in apartments in California. People still buy apartments in California and New York and Connecticut and whatever other blue democratic state you're thinking about. It all depends on how can you be successful with the team members and the skills and the relationships that you have there in order to operate a property efficiently in that market.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's safe to say that there's a blanket statement that you should only buy stuff in red states or you should never buy stuff in blue states, right? There's a line there. And it really depends on what value you're bringing to the table and your level of expertise to be able to operate in that market. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. You use California as an example. I'll use New York as an example. New York City is very, very tenant friendly. There's a lot of tenant friendly laws that are
Rent control. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that are very, very difficult to navigate. But there's guys who have been and still do operate and invest and own in that city who do extremely, extremely well. But they know how to navigate those rules.
Yep.
They know how to build that into their business plan, right?
Yep.
I don't.
That's
I
right.
don't. So I don't operate there. That would be a very head banging against the wall experience for me. So I operate where I know how to navigate the waters, right? So yeah, Tim summed it up best. It's where you are able to operate, where you know it, and where you're able to operate. There is no best. The best depends on you, really.
Yep. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining this week. We hope you found this valuable to have an understanding of our journey and what it took for us in order to find our markets, what we're doing, our future outlook, and all of those things. And take some of this, obviously, take what you hear with a grain of salt, because this is exactly what worked for us. It may or may not work for you, but if you can take some of the things or some of the lessons that we're talking about and implement it into your own journey, then we hope that if there's just a small fragment of information in here that helped you out, that you'd be able to find a little bit more success a little bit quicker than we did. And that's all we're trying to do, is just be transparent, show you exactly what we're doing, what we did, where we messed up, what our thought processes were, some books that we've read to educate ourselves, and how you can educate yourself the same way.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And Adele, I do agree. Portugal is a great market. Look forward to traveling there soon.
Yeah. All right, guys. See you next week.
All right. Take care, guys.